Sultan, I have a presentation. Can I go ahead and share my screen as well?
Yeah, you can share it.
Perfect.
Okay, so we
Okay.
just started the meeting.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Skill of the Month session. As today's session is all about exploring the exciting field of user experience and about how to break into it. What skills are needed and how you can leverage your existing background to build a career in this space. Whether you're a design enthusiast, a curious researcher, and someone still figuring out your career direction. This career is all about help you navigate your path into the UX world. We're thrilled to welcome our speaker, Ms. Hira Iqbal, a LUMS alumna and current UX researcher at Conversion, which is a leading CRO agency based in Vancouver, Canada. Hira graduated for LUMS in 2018 with a degree in economics, then pursued her passion for academic research with a master in sociology from Columbia University. Today, she'll be sharing her own journey and practical strategies for anyone looking to break into this evolving in-demand field of UX. Before we begin, just a quick reminders. Please hold your question until the end. We'll have a dedicated Q&A section. You're welcome to drop your question in the chat anytime during the session. And as always, keep that space respectful and engaging for everyone. So let's get started. Hira, over to you.
Alrighty. Thanks, Sultan, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining. I've prepared a little presentation, so I'm just going to share my screen. I'm hoping everyone can see. Sultan, can everyone see? Okay.
Yeah, they can see it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So, yeah, so like Sultan gave a great introduction to the session and to myself. But basically, we're going to be talking about, just UXR in general. And there's a few sort of agenda items that I'm going to go over. I'm going to start with just talking about myself and who I am, and how I got into UXR, and then what UX is specifically, and then what UX researchers do. And then we'll sort of move into how you can sort of start thinking about building a career in UX research. And then we'll just quickly go over our main takeaways. And then, like Sultan mentioned, we'll have questions at the end. So this is going to be a really long period of me speaking for a lot, and then and then having your questions. So yeah, I'm just going to sort of get into it. So who even am I? My name is Hira. I've been working in research, I think, since I graduated. So I have about 6 years of experience in research in general. And then the past 3-ish years, a little over now, has been in UX research specifically. My work experience generally comes from agency-based work. So previously I was at Rain, where I was working as part of a larger design team in a studio setting. And then currently I'm at Conversion, which, like Sultan mentioned, is a CRO agency in Vancouver. CRO basically means conversion rate optimization. So it's kind of marketing adjacent. And by agency-based work, it means that we don't have in-house products. We have clients come in with their products, and they're outsourcing their user experience needs to us. While at Conversion, I get to work with some really cool clients like Microsoft and Whirlpool. It's pretty fun because I get to sort of help them on. Actually, never mind. That's an NDA. And then previously, I worked with Complex Media while I was at Rain. So all really fun stuff. It's always really exciting. And currently, I'm also volunteering with Design for Good, which is an organization based in the UK, and they basically aim to leverage design to work towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So currently, I'm working with a really small squad on a game that tries to teach school students about misinformation online. So that's really fun work. But yeah, so I wasn't always here, and I didn't even plan to be in UX research for the most part. And that's what I'm about to get into as well. So how did I get here? It was predominantly by accident. And there's a point to this entire story. It's gonna be a long story, but there's a point to it. So like Sultan mentioned, I graduated in 2018 with my bachelor's in economics. And my entire career trajectory has been shaped by wanting to do research. It's just figuring out what kind of research I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I wanted to do economic research. I had taken so many courses on quantitative research skills and leveraging those research skills for economic and development research. And really quickly, I was like, no, this is not what I want to do at all. And that's right after I graduated. So then I was like, you know what, maybe I want to do a PhD in sociology. Maybe I want to go the sociology, anthropology route, get my PhD and become an academic. So in 2020, I graduated from Columbia with my master's in sociology. After that, I worked briefly with the UN. I worked on an oral history archive. It was all geared around trying to build my qualitative research experience and work towards that PhD that I really wanted to do. And yeah, so that was during COVID. I had to move back to Pakistan. But the overall goal was still to sort of keep working towards that PhD. In 2021, I came back, I continued working in archival research, and I'd started working in UX work without really realizing it. And I'll come back to this point, but this is a really important point. So yeah, 2021 was that. In the middle of 2021, our project ran out of funding and I had to scramble for a job. So I was like, you know what? I had done my master's in organizational sociology. I was like, maybe I can use that and turn it into a career in HR or turn it into a career in something HR adjacent. And that's when I started looking around. And so in 2022, I moved into an executive search consultancy, which is basically hiring. Um, and that was my first sort of corporate job. And it was interesting. I worked there for a year and I was like, you know what? I enjoy corporate work. I don't enjoy executive search. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't the right fit for my, I wasn't using any of the skills I'd worked so hard to build. So I wanted to move away from that, but I didn't know what to do next. I had absolutely no idea, basically. Um, no career direction. As you can see, I've been everywhere. And at that point in time, a friend of mine was working at a tech startup called Rain. And he told me they had openings in user experience research. And I was like, I do not know what that is. I have no experience. I have no idea what any of that is. And he said, it's a very similar sort of skill set to what you have right now, just apply. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll apply. So I did. And it was really funny because often in the interviews, they'd be like, you have a portfolio? And I'd be like, no, I do not have a portfolio. And I didn't know anything about UX. And I would explain my previous research experience to them. But they did take a chance on me. And I did move into a dedicated UXR role with Rain in 2023. And that was probably the best sort of accident that happened to me because when I moved into UXR in a full-time role, I realized it was a really steep learning curve, and that's because I went into it with like no information. But once I was there, I was like, this is perfect. This is such a great use of the skills I have. This is such an interesting sort of field to be a part of. And I've been working in UXR since then, basically. So it was really exciting. It doesn't seem like a really long time ago, but it's been a while. And so the point that I wanted to sort of come towards is that my first official UX role was, at Rain. But before that, my sort of actual UX experience came from that brief period in 2021 when I was working, with a professor at LUMS. And the way that I accidentally worked in UX work is basically I was working on an oral history archive because at that point in time, that was what my specialty was. But she also had another project going on with an NGO, and they basically wanted to develop an application, and they were doing some preliminary research on the audience for that application. And so I was working with her, and she said, "You know what? Can you just help me out with this other thing as well?" And I did, and I didn't even realize, but that basically in UX research, that's called generative research. Those were exploratory interviews, and I was basically doing UX research without realizing. And that's kind of the point that I want to get to today is that I didn't have a clear road to get to UX. Honestly, I was doing UX without realizing it. And then even when I got to UX, there wasn't like a clear path or like a building towards that career. It just kind of happened. But when I did find it, it was one of the best sort of career paths for me. And no one really told me about it, and I wish they had. And that's what I'm here to do for you. And I hope that if you do find it interesting, it is something you can pursue. Um, and yeah, basically. So that was sort of a brief synopsis, and we're gonna get into the what is and how to and all of that stuff right now. And I'll try to sort of briefly cover all of the main points. This isn't an incredibly long session, so I'm going to try to sort of touch upon all of the important pieces while we have the time. So what is user experience? And some of you probably already know what it is, but for those of you who don't, I'm just going to sort of brush over it. So user experience isn't everything. It's not just digital design. It's not just websites and apps, but it's everything you can think about as having experience. So it can be everything from chair designs to experiences like checking in at a concert venue. It's basically a user's experience, and that term is all encompassing. It can leverage a lot. And when we think about digital products specifically, it's how users sort of experience an app or website, how they go through it, what their journey looks like, what's difficult, what's easy. That is UX. And the reason why it's important is because if someone doesn't like the way something works, they'll leave. And it's as simple as that. If you don't like a chair, you're just going to replace it. And with apps and websites, if you don't like an app or website, you will delete it and you will leave. And that is the last thing any app or website wants, is for you to just ignore it. And that is why UX is important. You have to make sure that the user journey is nice, it's good. When it comes to design specifically, you often hear UI and UX sort of uttered in the same breath and kind of used conflatingly with each other. The primary difference is UI is just the visual elements of design. So that is the color scheming, what a button looks like, what the overall thing looks like. But UX is the functional elements of design. So how do those things work? How do users experience those? And a great illustration of that is this meme I always come back to, which I find really useful when someone can't tell the difference, because UI, in terms of UI, both of these things look, I mean, they're both visual forms of representation, but in terms of UX, they're completely different. So yeah, that's a sort of brief overview on what UI and UX is. But how do we sort of understand and evaluate user experience, specifically in the digital sort of field? There's sort of multiple factors to consider, and there's a lot of guides and principles on the internet, and a lot of different institutions have their own sort of guides and principles, and they all kind of harken back to the same thing overall. But one of the basic sort of one of the most standard institutions you will probably be calling back to is the Nielsen Norman Group. I should have written that in full. That is my bad. But they are a great resource to sort of look into for usability standards, for just guides on how to go about things. They're great. And then I borrowed this guide from them. They have a lot of more in-depth guides, but I thought that this was a really good initial sort of guide to start with when you're developing a basic understanding of user experience. And these are 5 sort of principles that you can use to evaluate the quality of usability for an app or website. So the first one would be learnability. So how easy it is for users to learn how to use the design when they first encounter it. The second is efficiency. So once they've learned how to use it, how easy is it for them to keep navigating it? How can they easily sort of complete what they came to do in an efficient sort of manner? Memorability is straightforward. When users return to the design after a long period of time, how easy is it for them to sort of figure out or pick up the app again without sort of having to relearn a lot? The fourth is errors, and this is sort of a really key one, and I'll touch on that in a bit, but basically it's how many errors do users make? Are there clear guides to guide them out of their error once they've made the error? And then how severe those errors are. And then satisfaction. So how pleasant is the design to use? As a UX researcher, I found that for the most part, I'm often sort of researching or solving for the first one and the fourth one, so learnability and errors, because often our primary focus is making sure people can use the app, they can see and learn how to use the app, and they're not making severe errors when they're using the app. Those are your first priorities. Efficiency, memorability, and satisfaction come after those, because those are sort of, in my opinion, because those are things that will improve the quality, but the first ones are very critical to sort of ensuring that users can actually work with the application to begin with. And I have a couple of sort of examples to sort of show you. I threw these in because I wanted to discuss a little bit or see rather what kinds of designs are out there. So the Ryanair website is a great example of not the best user experience. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you can probably already, when you first see it, figure out some of those. The first is that it's incredibly overwhelming. The user's eye is not drawn to any one thing or in any specific order. So it's lacking visual hierarchy. You kind of look all over the page and you're not sure what you should focus on. And this sort of burdens the user because it increases their cognitive load. their cognitive load, because they have to spend a lot of time reading through each thing to find the pieces that are important for them, because all of this kind of blends into one, and that is not fantastic. Another example that you guys might be familiar with is firstly any Pakistani banking application, but specifically the one that I pulled was Alpha Mall, because sometimes I open Alpha Mall and it's the worst experience of my life and I close it immediately. I'm sorry if anyone works at Alpha or has worked at Alpha. I hate Alpha Mall. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. The iconography is incredibly unclear. You have no idea where to go or what to do. So for example, in specific, what I mean by that point is that bell icon on the bottom right has no function. I clicked on it and nothing happened. And that was very frustrating for me because I was like, what does this do? What is this for? The font size is incredibly inaccessible to people who might have visual impairments, especially on that first screen when you land there. It's fine for if you're good at, if you have like perfect eyesight, or even if you have good eyesight. For older users, have you ever seen your parents holding their phone up to their faces? This is going to be impossible to read. They're not going to read this. Again, there's a lack of visual hierarchy. My eyes don't focus on any one face. On any one place. They kind of start at the top. They land on those categories, and then those categories are so hard to read. Anyways, it's just there's no systematic way for me to travel down the page. And then there's a lot of, so I focused on the looking to buy feature because it opens up this pop-up on the right. And I feel like this is a clear case of sort of not knowing your audience or not having done any usability research into what your audience's preferences are. Because I do not know anyone who would be comfortable sort of filling this form out. I think my parents would open this form and close it immediately because it's asking me for my credit card information, not directly, but it's asking me credit card tick, and it's asking me for my phone number and city, and it's asking me for my product name. How many of you actually know a product name when you go searching for something, right? Like it's very rare. It's not a browsing thing. So again, this speaks volumes about not having conducted any usability experience research and just launching something. Conversely, there's also a good example in here, which is one of my favorites, is the Lululemon app. I think this is a great example of just clean design. It's breathable design. There's really clear categories for everything with really bold, clear font. So again, your eyes are immediately drawn to first the heading and then the subheading and photos, because they've used font boldness and font sizes to draw your eye to the important pieces first, and then the secondary pieces after that. So first you go to the headings and the subheadings, because everything is systematic. There's also a clear sort of prioritization of the user's needs, because when you land on the app, the first thing you see is your recent orders. And that's often a key priority for people, is what they've just ordered, and seeing that status immediately makes it easier for me to use the app, because I don't have to go to my account and then go and check. It's going to show up there. And yeah, just like the iconography is fantastic. It's super clear. It's super standard. So people know what to expect when they click on it. So this was just overall a really good example of clear and breathable design and good user experience, in my opinion. And then, sort of just driving home from all of these points that I've just discussed, I really wanted to bring up the idea of user friction. And the reason I brought up, user friction, and previously we talked about the usability, sort of evaluating the quality of usability, is because I want you guys to sort of remember these things when you're interacting with apps and websites, and keep them at the back of your mind, just so that you start thinking along these terms if this is something you want to pursue. So your goal as a UX researcher is often to identify user friction or pain points. And I wanted to go over what kinds of friction exist. Friction is basically anything that impedes the user from fulfilling the reason why they came to the application or website. So if they're not able to do what they came to do for any reason, that's friction. It's making it harder for them. And as a UX researcher, you're not just sort of identifying areas of friction and leaving it at that. You're usually very actively recommending how to solve for that friction. You're recommending ways and solutions to designers and working with them to figure out what is the best outcome, or what is the best sort of path to proceed forward to improve the UX of a specific app or website. And friction can be in many forms, but these are sort of this hierarchy of friction I found really fascinating. So the base level is interaction friction, which is basically anything in your app design or website design that part of the design is making it harder for users to complete things. So for example, if there's too many pop-ups, if you're signing up for an application and there's like 50 steps, you're just going to drop off halfway through. That is friction at the interaction level, and it is the easiest to solve for because you can sort of I was going to say attack, but that's really aggressive. You can target that very easily. You can just solve for it. The second type is cognitive friction. So when clicking on a button takes you somewhere you didn't really expect. And that's sort of a confusion-based thing where, for example, when sometimes apps don't use standardized iconography when they try to be really funky and the funk kind of makes it really confusing instead for users, that's cognitive friction. Again, that's kind of still in the realm of solvability. You kind of have to isolate what the issue is, and then you have to figure out how to change it to make it more sort of easy to understand for users. The third is kind of the trickiest to solve for, and that's emotional friction. So that is anything in the user's own belief system or thoughts that is preventing them from going forward with what they came to the app to do. And the most common sort of form of this is data privacy concerns, especially if you've ever seen your parents using digital banking apps in Pakistan. I keep coming back to banking apps, but data privacy concerns is a societal concern in Pakistan. So that's an emotional friction that is very sort of tricky to alleviate in terms of your design, but it's important. That's where UX research, again, throughout all of this, UX research is really important, but here specifically to understand what the user's holdups are and how you can solve for those is really critical here, especially. And one way that it can be alleviated is, for example, I know the Microsoft website will have, like, buying a laptop online is a big thing. Sometimes people don't like doing that because it's a huge purchase to make online. The Microsoft website sort of consistently reminds users that there's like a 60-day money back guarantee, and that goes a long way towards leveraging or making it easier for users to complete that purchase then, or releasing that emotional friction in some way. So yeah, in terms of what is UX, we talked about what is UX, but also how you can evaluate the quality of usability and then also friction. And these are all things that I sort of, again, wanted to highlight as things to keep in mind when you're going through apps and websites yourself. Because if you train yourself into that design thinking, it becomes second nature, basically. A lot of talking. All right. So my next point is, what do UX researchers do? Because again, my focus is on showing you what UXR looks like on a day-to-day basis. I found this really cool quote, which is basically, how do I explain what I do at a party? And the short version is that I say I humanize technology. You can't say that to anyone you know because they won't understand this either. But this is a great way of sort of explaining what UXRs do overall, which is basically they bring that human element into the design process. Oops, my bad. So what do UXRs even do? The goal for UX researchers is to understand how users interact with design. They have to understand why users interact with design and how that interaction can be made more efficient, intuitive, and enjoyable. And UXR is sort of a constant companion to the design process. So it's not like it's a step in the process, like, you design, you develop, you research. It's kind of like you're constantly researching alongside designing and development. So you research before the designs are started, you research during the designs that are happening. After development and launch, you kind of research in an evaluative sort of sphere if things are still working. So there's a constant sort of research aspect going on, and that's really critical because it's inefficient to design without research. If you're researching side by side, you're sort of backing all of your design decisions by saying we tested this with users and it works, so we can proceed with this. If you don't do that, you kind of design and develop in, I forget the word, I always forget the word, in a silo, in a vacuum. And the consequence of that is that when you test later on at the end of it and realize there's huge glaring issues that could have been resolved before, you've basically wasted time and effort and you've wasted money, basically. So research is a constant companion. And as a UX researcher, basically your role is to represent the voice of the user in these design discussions, because often it's really easy to lose sight of how the user might interpret a design. And that's your sort of role in all of this, is to explain or present the user's opinion or their the way that they might interact with things or respond to things, and then also propose how to make things more user-friendly or more intuitive. In terms of the day-to-day, it's very sort of turning research requests into research studies and planning and conducting those studies. That means recruitment and execution. And then also synthesizing your findings. So answering research questions and proposing solutions based on the research and your understanding of usability standards. So that's really critical, where your goal isn't to just sort of do the research and then say, oh yeah, this is what I found. Anyone can do that really. Your expertise or your goal is firstly, you'll develop expertise with your audience after having repeatedly tested them so many times. And then secondly, based off of your knowledge of how usability works and what does work and what doesn't work and what's important, you can recommend changes based off of the feedback you've received. So your role there is very critical in terms of just answering for that usability piece with your expertise and with the research that you've done. So I also included an example. This is a very surface level example. Most studies are done in a lot more detail than this, and they're a lot more granular, but this is a very sort of high level example of what some studies look like. So you receive a request to evaluate and test the search experience redesign for a product you're working on. What does this mean? We break that down a little bit. Evaluate and test. So you're doing a usability test on the search experience redesign. So the search experience, you all know what that is. It's when you go into an application and you're searching for a product, and the redesign of that would basically be they isolated some problems initially and they're working on redesigning to solve for those. And now you're testing it out to see if it works. So the first, I use the Sephora app as an example. But basically what you're first going to do is you're just going to chart out what that search experience looks like. I normally use FigJam for this because I find it very easy to use. You can use any tool that works for you. But basically I chart out the experience from the start point to the end point. And in this case, the start point and end point are always really sort of, there's no concrete way of defining those. It really depends on the scope of your study. So for example, if they've only changed something in that initial search bar, so the trending searches pieces or the recent searches pieces, then you're just going to limit the scope of your study to those first 2 or 3 screens. If they've revamped the whole thing to include filters, then you're going to go into those last few screens as well. But the idea is to basically chart out the entire user journey from start to end, and then use the knowledge that you have, use your usability knowledge to see and break down where you think users might struggle or where there might be potential friction for users. So you're basically sort of taking this information and isolating potential pain point areas for users. So yeah, basically what I just said. You're going to understand the user journey, evaluate it from a UX lens, and then develop hypotheses around users might experience friction with XYZ, and then develop your research plan to test that out. And with a usability study, which is basically what this is, you're designing a test that guides users through the feature that you're testing, and effectively sort of captures their feedback. So an example of this is just one task. You're going to have several tasks like these in the entire study. And I can break this up into 2 pieces. Let me just do that now. So there's 2 pieces to this task. The first piece is you're looking to purchase a lip liner on the Sephora app. You aren't sure what brand or type you want, so you decide to use the search option. Take a moment now to use the search feature to help you find a lip liner. That first piece in yellow is context setting. And it's really important to develop context for the users because they are going into this without any context. So they don't know what they're supposed to be doing or looking for. And that just wastes a lot of time, honestly. You need to create a stage for the user, a scenario for the user to enter, and then interact with the stimulus so that they can interact with it in the way that you need them to find what you're looking for. So you have to set context with each task. The second piece is the actual task itself. So navigate the process as you naturally would, click on anything you would normally interact with, and remember to share your thoughts out loud. That's a really standard command in a lot of tasks in usability studies, is to remember to share your thoughts out loud. It's a good reminder for users, but more importantly, you need their thoughts to come out organically. So yeah, so the first half will always be context setting. The second half will always be the actual task itself. And then there's always some follow-up questions. And these are usually sort of standard questions that make them reflect on the experience after they've completed the task. So after they've done this piece, questions like, what are your thoughts on the search feature? What do you think worked well? What do you think didn't work well? And then a common question to ask with usability studies is, what would you change about the search feature? The way that I tend to frame it is, what would you change about the search feature to make it better for the next person? And the reason why I frame it that way is because when I asked, because I've done both. So when I used to ask, what would you change about the search feature? So many people found it really easy to just say, oh, I would change nothing. I really like it. It's great. And that's not helpful to me. That doesn't tell me what to work on next. But if I ask them, what would you change about the search feature to make it better for the next person? They were more like, because it's a more active question, it's not passive. They were more likely to sort of think like a designer and actually actively say something. So 9 out of 10 times people actually say something to this question, which is really helpful for me. So that was a basic sort of example of a usability study task. This is just one task in a larger study, and it's going to be a lot more granular than this. This was just a very high level example. And when it comes to, UXR methods very broadly, there are a lot. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of different ways to divide or segment those methodologies. Some people say qualitative methodologies and quantitative methodologies. Other people have other ways of categorizing them. One of the ones that I find most helpful is generative UXR and evaluative UXR. And very simply put, generative UXR is basically everything that happens before a product is launched. So it's everything sort of exploratory in nature. It can be landscape analyses, it can be wireframing, which is basically, developing initial sketches of what the app would look like. Exploratory interviews with your target audience, user journey mapping, what the user journey will look like, and field research. And card sorting is a little more technical. I'm not going to go into it, it's long. But it's not hard, it's just long to explain. The second category is evaluative research, which is basically once your product has launched, now you're conducting evaluative research to see how it's going, what it's looking like, and what needs to be worked on moving forward. So this is everything, including the biggest piece, which is usability testing, which is the most common piece you will be doing as a UX researcher, which is testing how usable the app is, how user-friendly it is, how intuitive it is, and those usability standards that we discussed earlier, and friction. Yeah. Heuristic evaluations, which is a fancy way of saying evaluating the application based on the usability standards. User persona development. This is, again, just getting a snapshot of your users. And I like user persona development because it is not just demographic information on your users. It's not just going to be where they live and how old they are. It's understanding what their motivations are, what their needs are, what their day-to-days look like, to develop a holistic picture of your user, to understand what they're like as people, so you can answer their needs more effectively with your application. Surveys, analytics, and tree testing, again, straightforward, except for tree testing, which is like card sorting a little longer. But my goal with sort of very broadly overwhelming you with all of these different methodologies is that the idea with all of these is broadly the same as with any research, because the core skill you need above all else is being able to ask the right questions and draw out the right insights to answer those questions that will inform your product and push the product strategy forward. So these are all just different methodologies, and they do require some learning, but it's not impossible. It's not like really tricky. You're not performing surgery. They're research methodologies. They're tools for you to use. Your skill is being able to ask the right questions and use them effectively. If you're good at sort of asking incisive questions, wording your questions right, leveraging research well, understanding people, because I think a great part of UX research is being empathetic towards users. If you're good at that, these tools will just be in your toolkit to help you do your work. But your core skill is being able to do research effectively and being able to sort of have a bunch of information and be able to draw exactly what you need out of it to move forward. And that's what I really wanted to highlight with all of these methods, is you will come across so many tools, you will keep learning tools as you go along. This slide is not aligned well. That's really annoying. But the core skill that you will bring to the table is that you will ask the right questions. You will be a good researcher. And that moves me on to my next sort of point, which is how do you sort of move into UX research? So like I mentioned, at the core of UX research is the ability to conduct research just within a different context and with different tools. So you'll still use that sort of core research skill that you built over the years. And that's what I really liked about UX research is I had the core skill. I just needed to learn all of these other things as well. But your tools will change and your lens of analysis will be different. And that's the most important sort of piece. So the first thing you sort of need to do, and this isn't an exhaustive list, by the way, this is just what I feel is important to start off. And then obviously you're going to keep going. So the first piece is obviously reframing your research and its purpose. Your research is geared towards finding out a problem, solving the problem, and moving forward. You want to find a problem and solve it so that it sort of moves your product strategy forward. And it's different to academic research in a way because academic research is kind of sometimes, not all the time, but oftentimes it's kind of building into a repertoire or not a repertoire, a repository of research. It's building into like this whole sort of universe of research and you're adding to it, you're adding to the literature. But this research is very sort of fast-paced with a very direct focus of we need to find the problem so we can solve the problem, so we can move forward. So we can make our app better. And then the larger product strategy is usually so we can increase revenues or we can have more people on the application, increase our users, reduce the amount of people leaving the application, for example. Those are usually your broad product goals. And your research is usually part of that larger framework of solving those goals. So it's very fast paced compared to academic research. Sometimes we're doing studies like we get the study at the start of the week and we have to deliver by the end of the week. So within that week, we have to figure out our research questions, our strategy, recruit our people, synthesize our findings, and churn out recommendations. So it can be very fast paced at times. And that's usually you're sometimes conducting multiple studies in one go as well. So it is a lot. Then there's also technical knowledge building, which comes with any sort of field that you will go into. But in this field specifically, it means familiarizing yourself with design concepts and literature on usability, the different methods for user experience research, and familiarizing yourself with language. And I will say that the technical knowledge building piece was the one that I think was the steepest learning curve for me. So like I mentioned, when I moved into UX research, I had no prior experience on anything. I remember one of my coworkers at the time was my mentor when I first joined. And he was like, oh, do you know, have you made slide decks before? And I was like, no, because I was coming from academic research. We don't make slide decks like that in the conventional sense. And then he asked me, oh, have you used Figma? And I was like, no. And so for the first sort of couple of weeks while I was there, I was just constantly reading up, everything I could online on usability, on working in a tech company, on design. It was a lot of reading. And honestly, this is core reading that you will do at the start, but you also continue doing. And you still continue to learn things because the field is always evolving. There's always something new to be discussed. And yeah, so it's a really big field, but there's a lot of resources and we'll talk about those in a bit. But yeah, the technical knowledge building piece is really important. And the third piece is making yourself an asset. And there's sort of, in my opinion, everything is contextual. There's two sort of key things you need to remember to make yourself a valuable UX researcher. And the first is storytelling ability, I will say, because you are often in a situation where you're presenting your findings to stakeholders who don't really care about your methodologies as much as they do the end product of your research. You have to be able to tell a story from the point of their problem, your findings, and the solution that you have to solve their problem. So you need to be good at it, because I've been in presentations where I was presenting for an hour and nobody was listening. You need to make sure that your research is heard, and for that you need to be a good storyteller. The second is contextualizing. So again, being able to position your research in a way that highlights its importance or its impact, its importance and its impact. So you're not just doing research for research, you're doing critical research to solve a critical problem that will help the product move forward in whatever it wants to do. You need to be able to highlight the importance of your research and not just sort of deliver the research. Anyone can deliver research. So yeah, contextualizing is important. Um, in terms of how to get into UXR specifically, again, these are things that I am aware of. Other people will know of other things as well. Sometimes it happens unwittingly, like it did with me. It happened as an accident because there is overlap across industries. But one of the ways that that worked for me is I was attached to a professor who happened to be doing research on a product. So look around yourself in the university. You're in an environment where there's so much happening and there's so much going on. There's bound to be an instructor somewhere who's working on an app or a website or with clients. So find those people out and offer to help or ask to be able to help build your portfolio out. Also look towards startups. These are usually organizations who, if you can prove you have the skill set, they are willing to take a chance on you. And they're a great way to sort of build your research experience or build your portfolio again. So look towards startups. Another sort of really cool way to do this is sort of conduct app evaluations or audits independently. We see bad UX all around us. There is no shortage of things that could be improved, especially in the Pakistan design space. Look at any banking app at all, any of them, they're all bad. Conduct app evaluations on those based off of your learning and UX research and turn those into case studies and blog posts and use those to start building your portfolio because those will sort of help tell prospective employers that you know what to look for and you know what you're doing, at least in terms of usability understanding. So that's a really cool way to sort of start building that piece out. Another thing I wanted to sort of mention was volunteering with Design for Good. They always have a bunch of different projects being launched, and they always need volunteers. Um, so usually you just have to reach out to someone. I think if you follow them on LinkedIn, they post about it. They post about prospective sort of projects that are coming up and the types of skills they're looking for to support with those. There's not always UX research, but there's always design needs and then sometimes research needs. So that's a fantastic way of building out your portfolio. That's actually a project that you can say you worked on. I don't know why Medium is on this side of this line. It should be on the other side. But Medium is a great resource to learn. I find Medium incredibly helpful. There's so many talented professionals on Medium just sharing their thoughts, sharing their opinions, talking about, usability as like in like a very sort of systematic format and just current trends and stuff in usability. I really like Medium. Fantastic, highly recommend. And that is actually a resource. It's not in that first column. So as we get into resources, the Nielsen Norman Group, again, like I mentioned, that's a really good sort of industry standard. It's very respected as a good basic place to understand usability. They have so many different tools and a lot of articles and blog posts about usability 101, different UX methodologies and how to get into those or how to start thinking about those. So they're a fantastic resource. Another resource is this website. I'll ask Sultan to sort of share these with you so you don't lose them. But growth.design, they have different case studies and a friend introduced me to them. And they're a really cool way to sort of understand usability thinking because they basically sort of conduct independent evaluations of a lot of famous apps or their user journeys. But the really cool thing is they break it down really effectively so you understand how it's going for like how to understand and analyze these things. And then also, yeah, like a great way to sort of train your brain to think like a UX researcher or to think in terms of usability. Another key or really cool part is testing on user testing or Dscout. User testing and Dscout are tools that UX researchers use for usability studies or testing with their audience. And the great thing about them is that we often sort of, as researchers, if we have a study, recruitment is the hardest part because if you need to recruit a specific audience, it's really difficult to find that audience in an unbiased sort of way. So user testing and Dscout are open platforms. Anyone can sign up as a participant or a tester. And basically, if we have a study, we float like a survey onto user testing. They send it out to their participants or testers, and anyone who's a good fit will come into our study. I myself am on user testing and Dscout as a tester as well. And the reason for that is because I find it incredibly helpful to sort of see the way that, firstly, it's a great way for you to learn how user testing looks. It's not, some user testing is good, some is bad. but it's a great introduction to what that might look like. But for me, I also just really like seeing what the user or the tester is seeing when I put a test out. And that helps me sort of refine my tests as well to ensure that they're sort of functional and they're coming across better to the users. Great tool. And you get money for it. Again, I mentioned, I don't know how frequently they're testing with Pakistani audiences. But there's no harm in signing up and seeing if a test shows up for Pakistan, just because a lot of tests I know tend to be geared around the North American or the UK side of things. But just wanted to put that out there. And then finally, there's innumerable books and resources. I cannot tell you how many books and resources there are out there on UX research and improving your practice and thinking about usability. One of the ones I really like is The Design of Everyday Things. You've probably heard of it. It's very popular. And it is by Don Norman from the Nielsen Norman Group. Fantastic book, just because it trains you to think about usability in your day-to-day life. So it's not just design, it's everyday life, which I find really cool. So there's a bunch of different books out there as well. Honestly, the learning, especially when you're coming from a field that's not sort of design or UX oriented, the learning is on you, and it depends on how much you're willing to learn. But there's so much to learn out there, and honestly, I find it really exciting. Like, I find it really interesting to learn all of this stuff because I really like the industry. And if you get into it, you might like it too. So just some resources, just some tips. And I wanted to also touch on portfolios because I felt like someone might ask about them. So I was like, let's just address portfolios while we're here. I actually finally got around to building my portfolio earlier this year, and it was really difficult because they are a very lengthy project sometimes. But your key asset with your portfolio, again, is storytelling and highlighting what is important. You will talk about sort of why your research was important, how did you strategize to answer problems, what was the impact of your research. That's always a key question, is what was the impact of your research? What did your research achieve? Because you're constantly having to prove that the research is valuable. And sometimes as a UX researcher, it can be difficult to gauge impact, but just try as best you can to just sort of frame the impact or the importance of that research at least. You will always, of course, share your methodologies because you want to show that you're experienced or well-versed in them, but you have to contextualize them with all of the other things as well. I've also learned that format is irrelevant. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some people have them in PDFs. Some people have them in slide decks. I have mine on a website just because I found it really easy to work with. But I think for a lot of employers in Pakistan, you should be able to use like a deck or PDF as well, and it's fine. Just work with whatever works for you. The key is to just sort of use your portfolio to show, firstly, again, your skills, you're displaying your skills. But I also think it's really important to show that you know how to create something that people actually want to look at and go through. That is both easy to go through, and it also sort of answers your users' needs, and your users are people who are coming to your portfolio. So yeah, have fun with your portfolio, use it to show your learning, but make sure it sort of displays that other skill as well, because it's inadvertently sort of doing exactly that. So yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch upon portfolios, and we're kind of drawing to our natural end, which is basically our main takeaways. Oh, I've been talking. So our main takeaways are basically, at the end of the day, we're all app and website users. We've all seen what good and bad user experience looks like. So we're already coming to this with some degree of experience as it is. The process of UX research collects and formalizes that experience so that we can work on improving it. But at the basal level, we all know what has been good and has been bad. We just don't know the words to attach to it and how to break it down and analyze it more thoroughly. Another thing I really wanted to drive home is that UXR is an incredibly accessible field. Someone recently asked me, oh, I don't have a degree in HCI. Can I still get into UXR? And I was like, absolutely. I don't know when that became a thing, but you can absolutely get into UXR. People come from all sorts of fields. Someone I know is a musical anthropologist, and they're in UX research right now. So you can move into UXR from everywhere, because like I've mentioned throughout this presentation, there's a lot of basal skills that are the same across the board. or that you can leverage in UXR from previous fields. There's no one way to enter this field. I have been all across the board in so many different careers, and I ended up here. So yeah, and then yeah, so like I mentioned, what you truly need is like a sharp sense of what research is and how to extract the right information when you have like a bulk of data or a bulk of a lot of people saying a lot of things. How do you draw out the right insights that will help inform your product? That's what you truly need. And then for me personally, I love UX. I find this field so incredibly rewarding because I get to use research skills that I've spent years building in a field that I really enjoy being a part of, because I get to work adjacent to the design process, and I get to work with designers and leverage that creative problem solving ability. And I also get to interact with so many cool people and learn continuously because firstly, the users, I get to speak to users or audiences that I would have never even met in my lifetime. The screenshot from on the right is from a focus group I conducted with users in Africa. And again, it's just really exciting and really sort of it expands your worldview. It's a really exciting prospect. And then secondly, the people in the field itself tend to be, so UX researchers, UX designers tend to be so passionate about their work and so well informed. I've always found that wherever I worked, I learned from the people around me, and that has been incredibly sort of rewarding. And the field itself is always evolving. So I don't know if you would have seen it, but you might have seen it. Currently or recently, Apple launched their Glass UI, and that was a whole debate on LinkedIn. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone had opinions about it, from designers to researchers. And it was all the same sort of designers were saying, oh, this is so cool. It's so cool that they achieved this. Researchers were saying, oh, this is incredibly inaccessible. But what was really exciting to see is that everyone had an opinion. And what was more exciting for me is that having worked in this field for as long as I have now, it's not very long, but it's somewhat, I also had an opinion. And it was exciting to see that I had an opinion informed by the research or that I'd done over the years and also the learning that had happened. So it's exciting. There's always something new happening. And yeah, I think I really enjoy being part of this field. And if any of this resonated with you, I think you might also enjoy working in this field. But if anything else, your main takeaway from this should be that this is also a career option for yourself. It's a very accessible field. You just need to learn the tools. You need to learn the sort of framing of your research, the language, and the methodologies, which sounds like a lot, but it all comes with time. It's not impossible. It's not like I'm saying, you studied humanities and now you're going to go do surgery. It's not the same. So yeah, incredibly accessible field, incredibly rewarding field for me personally. And yeah, that's sort of the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Hira. It was an incredible presentation. I just loved it. Okay, so guys, you can throw your questions in the chat box. Hira will take it, or you can raise your hand if you want to speak.
Oh, okay. There are a lot of
Okay.
questions in the chat box.
Yeah. Okay. So Hira, let's start with the first question. I will speak it and you can answer it. Okay. So Ahmed Wali is asking, are UX testing platform under testing or Scout? Give a good estimate, especially given some money is involved with participation. So do companies accept them as organic if we do this independently? Since participants know they are being paid and we can select the participation types, etc.
They are organic, and the reason for that is you're always going to have to give some incentive to your users. The reason why they're organic is because you can't just sign up to do any test. Usually we choose our demographic that we want the test sent to, and then even from that demographic, we have a survey that we've developed. And if they don't meet our needs, they get dropped from the test. So if they meet all of those criteria, then they're selected for the test. The reason why this is an unbiased test, or why this is universally accepted as a good sampling methodology, is because these are completely randomized. We have no idea who these participants are going to be, and so there's no bias involved. It is just people who meet our criteria. So yeah, it is. I mean, you have to give incentive, so it's always going to be a paid test anyways. But yeah, this is a great sampling methodology.
Okay, so the next question is from Maruf Murad. She's saying, "Hello, Hira. Thank you so much for insightful session. I had a question about the intersection between UX research and UX design. In my experience with job hunting for UXR roles in the Pakistan market, I found most companies combine both UX research and design in one role. How important do you think it is for someone trying to break into the UXR market to learn design skills, not just design thinking, but the technical aspect? Or should one continue to find roles centered around UX research only if their main skill set is I research?"
Yeah, I think that's a really good question uh because I also had the same question a few years ago. Because a lot of companies do that. They do tend to sort of lump the two together. It's often the expectation is reversed. It's not that UX researchers do design, it's that designers do research. So research is often given the back foot as something that everyone can do, and then designers are usually prioritized. And I asked a senior this question a few years ago as well, and he told me to not do that. Basically, you want to focus on UX research because you should be good at one thing. Your value proposition is being an excellent UX researcher. And there are openings. I know there's fewer and farther in between because companies are expecting to sort of save costs and have everyone do one person do everything. But focus on making yourself a good UX researcher because being mildly good at two things versus being really good at the one thing is going to be your core value or your core offering, I would say. So don't worry about reading out the questions. I can read them myself. Um, all right, so Afreen asked, what kind of UX research can I include in my portfolio to show that I'm more than just a UI designer? Oh, I can't speak to design. I'm sorry. I am just a researcher, so I can only speak to research skills. What kind of UX research can I include in my portfolio to show that I'm more than just a UI? Um, I'm confused because I think your question asks about design and research. So yeah, I'm sorry. I can't sort of speak to the design portfolio piece of it. And I don't want to misguide you by saying something I don't know about. So I'm going to avoid that question. Sorry. If you can clarify your question, I'm happy to sort of, if I can answer it, but that's where I'm at. Are there any courses or YouTube channels you use to learn? Not YouTube channels, but the Nielsen Norman Group also has a podcast, and they have really good sessions on current trends. So there was a recent session on users and AI, because AI adoption is a really big sort of trend in UX research these days. Um, so I would check out the Nielsen Norman Group podcast. In terms of YouTube channels, I'm not sure. I'm sorry. But if you look around, you will find a bunch of resources. And then, how would you advise to learn tools and research with a plethora of resources on YouTube and other such stuff, given it can be overwhelming? Yes, I agree. It can be overwhelming. It is overwhelming. I would say the easiest way to start learning is by looking at case studies, because they use select methodologies or select concepts in certain situations. So they're very contextualized. It's not just theories and methodologies in one go. It's like one theory connected to one concept, and it's showing you an example. So look at case studies. The growth.design case studies are really useful because those will help you understand the concepts. In terms of methodologies, I'm not sure. But I will say that, yeah, the case studies are your best bet to sort of start learning really quickly. And then once you're familiar with the language, the more theoretical stuff will seem more intuitive, I would say. And then when freelancing, what's the minimum viable research you recommend before starting design? I am not sure what this question means because, um, again, I am speaking as a researcher. So at my end, I haven't really worked with design. So I'm not sure. If you can clarify that question, I'm happy to answer it or try to answer it if that helps. Or if there, I hope I
And
answered everyone's questions, by the way. If I didn't, please let me know.
yeah, guys, you can raise your hands as well or just drop a question. Let's wait for like 2 minutes, Hira.
Sure, happy to.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions. Okay, thank you so much, Ira, for such an insightful session and engaging one. Just love your
Oh,
presentations, and we truly appreciate your valuable contribution to us. Okay, thank you all for being a part of today's session. We hope you find it
so Don,
informative and inspiring. Okay,
there's one other
yeah,
question. Let me just quickly answer that.
okay,
Sorry,
yeah,
sorry to
yeah,
break you off.
sorry. I just,
Um,
yeah.
in building a solid portfolio for UX research as a career prospect, are graduate studies recommended? Yeah, just use whatever you have. Honestly, anything that can show that you know, any again, like anything that sort of shows that you know how to take a research question or a problem, turn it into a methodology or a strategy or research strategy, and then find the information that you need to answer that problem. Anything you can do to show that, even if it's just pieces of that, even if you haven't done like the complete A to Z, if you've done like one piece of that, use whatever you can at this point in time to build out your portfolio and show that you have the skill set that you need. Um, yeah. Now we can continue.
Here's another question.
Oh,
Same from Eamon, yeah.
any coursework, research would work. Um, so not in your portfolio, I would say. Your portfolio is usually just specifically your design work. So I wouldn't include like just like anything you've done. Um, yeah, like because at max, no, if you have anything adjacent to design, I would include that. Or like I mentioned, like include like independent app evaluations and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like I wouldn't just use like any thesis or any research study that you've done for your portfolio specifically. In that situation, you can also like if you have nothing, you feel like you have nothing, even though you usually won't. But if you absolutely feel like you don't have anything to show for, you can just say you don't have a portfolio yet. I didn't have a portfolio when I first applied. And off the record, I some companies just ask for a portfolio as like a check mark thing. They don't really look at it. Some companies don't even ask for a portfolio. So that's also something to keep in mind. You're welcome. All right,
Let's
take
wait
it
for
away,
2 more
Sultan.
minutes. Or, yeah, okay. Everything. Thanks. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you all for being a part. For joining this session, and we hope you find information. Best of luck for you guys for exploring the new search of research, and see you guys in the next Clear session. And have a great evening. Thank you, Ira, again.
No worries. Goodbye.
Goodbye.